Over the last decade, there have been several incidents in which a private home has been broken into, and after trying to protect themselves, the victims were persecuted to a greater degree than the burglar. It would appear that the current laws go to a more of a length to protect a burglar than they do to protect the victims. Have you ever been in your home, sitting quietly, enjoying a cup of tea after a hard day's work, and then, when you heard a noise from the garden, a terrifying idea popped up in your head? What would you do if a burglar just came into your house that instant? Well, if you did, it might comfort you to know that you are not alone. Millions of people in modern Britain have the same worry. The answer is not so simple. In fact, it's very confusing for many of us. First of all, let's examine what the law says. Householders in the UK are allowed to use reasonable force to defend themselves. Every case would need to be considered with regards to its own facts and circumstances to ascertain whether a crime has been committed and whether it is in the public interest to raise criminal proceedings. In a quick glance, that looks adequate and quite clear, but unfortunately, as it happens with most legal stuff, it is much more complicated in reality. For a start, what exactly does it mean reasonable force? Let's check a few of the most famous cases over the last decade and see how was this law applied in actual cases. We probably all know about Tony Martin's case, where in 1999 Tony Martin, the Norfolk farmer who shot dead a burglar, Fred Barras, was charged with murder. He was since appealed, reducing his sentence, and was released early. Having suffered 3 break-ins, one 20 years earlier and 2 the year before the incident, and numerous thefts from outbuilding, so he had become obsessed with the criminals who plagued him. It was an obsession which the court heard made the shooting of Fred Barras on 20 August of 1999 a tragic inevitability. Martin, the court heard, had received death threats, and police intelligence sources claimed a 60,000 price had been put on his head. For the supporters of Tony Martin, such threats were proof that he was a wronged man and a justification for his actions. When Martin shot Fred Barras and Brendan Fearon, he encapsulated the rage and frustration of a section of society that once respected the police, but which is now intoxicated by the idea of taking the law into their own hands. Whether Tony Martin acted using reasonable force or not is for the courts and each one of us personally to judge, but what was interesting was that many people felt sympathetic towards him. Why was that? The police have advised if a member of the public find that they are being burglarized, they should immediately call the police and lock themselves in a room till the police comes. The police said that while householders could use reasonable force when confronted by a burglar, their advice was not to intervene. The police believe this would be the safest for the victims. Nevertheless, this is most of the time not the case, as victims feel obliged to protect their belongings and/or family. Just letting some common thief take away their possessions that they work hard to acquire, and who knows, even harm them, is simply not so common sense for the majority of people. It's only natural to want to protect ourselves and our territories. This is abundant everywhere in nature. The most appalling thing in this case is that in 2002 Brian Fearon tried to sue farmer Tony Martin, who was imprisoned for killing Fearon's accomplice, for damages after his leg was injured whilst leading a break-in at Martin's home in August 1999. Fearon was granted public funds to sue Martin on the grounds his injured leg had prevented him from working. You would think that a burglar suffering an injury from an understandably irate homeowner would be an occupational hazard, yet some burglars are suing for their injuries and in certain cases winning. What are the rights of a housebreaker then? Generally speaking, if you can just give us a guideline and just so we know. Because everybody, sorry I'm interrupting you, but everybody in the gallop we asked in the street said, should any housebreaker which accidentally is being hurt in my house be allowed to ask for a compensation according to the 1984 Act? I'm sure you know. And everybody said no.
There is no right to break into people's houses. That is not a human right. And if during the course of breaking into someone's house you're injured, then that's an occupational hazard. If the person, it's really the other side of what we've been talking about. Anyone, including housebreakers as well as householders, is entitled to expect that they will not be the victims of unreasonable force. But what is unreasonable force used against a housebreaker is probably going to be very different than what is unreasonable force used against a householder. So the housebreaker can't go in and attack the householder and then be knocked out and really complain about it.
Yes.
If, however, they're shot or stabbed in a situation where they would have run away, then they are entitled to the protection of the law. Compensating them is maybe another matter, and it's probably something that awards of compensation from the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority are affected significantly by whether you have a criminal record. So if you're a career housebreaker, you'll probably get no money, even if you're badly injured as a result of an assault by a householder, which has gone therefore beyond reasonable force. You will get little sympathy from anyone.
Thankfully, after 2003, no burglar can sue their victims without acquiring permission from the court. But still, according to the Occupiers Liability Act 1984, it's also possible for homeowners to be sued for damages if a burglar is injured whilst on their property. Under the same act, it is difficult to even put barbed wire on your wall. It may seem that the best way to avoid being burglared is to make sure that burglars cannot get anywhere near the property. Anyone who owns or controls property has a legal duty of care to protect people on their property from foreseeable harm. This duty extends to people on the property without permission, including burglars and vandals. A householder could be sued for damages under the Occupiers Liability Act 1984 if a burglar is injured whilst on their property.
Security measures have to be really prepared in a way that they will only deal with the problem. So you can't set up some sort of security for your home that is potentially going to cause injuries, and it maybe comes back closer to the idea of the booby trap. You can't set something up that's going to cause serious injury, even to housebreakers.
Do you think if an intruder breaks into your house, gets hurt by you, by a baseball bat or whatever it is, should he be allowed to seek compensation?
No, you're breaking into my house. Should I be allowed to seek compensation?
No, should he be allowed to seek
No, of course
compensation?
not. No.
This isn't New York, is it? Should he? No,
Yes.
not at all, no.
Who can say what is reasonable or not when under attack?
I'm a manager with Victim Support Scotland. Victim Support Scotland is a national charity which helps people who've been affected by crime. Housebreaking is a serious crime, and people can be much more affected by it than you would think. It might look as if somebody's just, broken a window and stolen your stereo, and other people may assume that that is a very low impact crime. But in fact, it's a horrible crime. It's a crime that really upsets people in the long term because there's been somebody, a stranger, in their house. Now, usually it's not the material value of the possessions that have been stolen. It's only money, things are replaceable. It's the sense that somebody has been in your house. I know one woman, for example, who after her house was burgled, she slept with a knife under her pillow. Now, this was a woman in her 50s. I don't know what she was going to do with it, but she felt insecure.
What happened when the people were inside the house when the burglar came in?
That really is frightening for people. I've actually been in that situation myself about 11 years ago. No, actually it'd be more than that, it'd be 13 or 14 years ago when my children were very small and they were babies asleep in their beds. And we heard somebody shouting through our letterbox. We were in a ground floor flat with a main door entrance.
Right, yes.
Why is someone shouting? So my husband got up and shouted at the people, get away from our house. And then we realised that one of them had actually come into our house, walked through to a back room and was hiding in a cupboard, would you believe? Now, in that situation, the intruder was actually drunk or on drugs, and my husband stood over him, again with a kitchen knife, until such time as the police arrived to remove him from the house. But I had two small babies sleeping in that house at the time, and fortunately in the other room, and it was absolutely terrifying. Most burglars are opportunistic. Most of them will have a drug problem. They see an open window, they see an open door, they take their chance. Most of them are in that sense, they're not really a danger, but you don't know. You don't know whether it is a rapist, a murderer that's broken into your house. You can't tell by looking. It's very frightening.
Another case is this one of Mylene Klaas. Klaas was in the kitchen with her daughter upstairs when she spotted the youths in her garden just after midnight on this January. She grabbed a knife and banged the windows before they ran away. Hertfordshire police warned her she should not have used a knife to scare off the youths because carrying an offensive weapon, even in her own home, was illegal. Her spokesman said that she was terrified by the experience and aghast at the warning by the police. Who in the right state of mind can blame her? Wouldn't we all do the same being in her position? If we would actually use the weapon to kill or not, obviously is quite a different matter.
Do you think what she did was reasonable?
I think it was fantastic. It's probably exactly what I would have done.
I think it becomes like a legal issue when you step beyond the threshold of your own property, then you're actually in a public area. But I think doing something like that just to scare people off, as long as it's in your own garden or in your own house, then I don't think that would be what you should be prosecuted for that. Because obviously you're just protecting the children.
No.
She's behind the glass just to scare them with that as a threat rather than taking an action with it.
Do you think that was reasonable, what she did?
Absolutely.
Natural?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think that we would do the same if we're women especially?
Well, if she stabbed the guy, I wouldn't, I wouldn't exactly condemn her. I wouldn't condemn her for it.
This concern about the adequacy of the law is not only coming from a few ordinary people here and there, but also from the world of politics. One of these people is Patrick Mercer, a Conservative MP at Newark, that in 2004 he introduced a private member's bill in response to the publicity surrounding the case of Tony Martin that proposed to give householders greater power when protecting their properties from burglary.
In civil law, the civil law was less favourable to the criminal than criminal law, because criminal law still allowed a burglar or an intruder to get into a house and for the householder or the shop owner to deal with that individual with an ambivalence, where the level of proof against the householder was lower in criminal law than in civil law. Right. So the intention was to try and bring the two laws into line with each other and show that in criminal law, the behaviour of the householder when he or she were trying to defend themselves had to be grossly disproportionate. That's the phrase, grossly disproportionate. Right. I failed because the Labour Party blocked me on this, but nonetheless it's still a very live issue. As the law stands at the moment, both the police and the Criminal Prosecution Service feel duty-bound to prosecute. And 9/10 of these cases, when they do come to court, are dismissed by a right-thinking judge and jury. Okay. The trouble is, of course, that in the middle, in the process in the middle, that the individual is dragged through the courts, is put under huge pressure and huge suspicion, often losing jobs, often being unable to work, etc., only to be told after many months, actually, you're as innocent as the day you were born. Now, that is why I would like the law to be changed, to try and bring some common sense and some resilience into this thinking.
Why are we not allowed to protect ourselves, loved ones and possessions the way we feel in our own house? Is the house of every man in Britain not his castle anymore? Do we need a state to tell us what we can and what we can't do to protect ourselves? It seems that we are faced with moral dilemmas here, that we have been somehow decided for us by the state with regards to a very old question: do material possessions worth a person's death? It is a very important question and probably a very personal one too, with regards to everyone's beliefs and convictions.